Well, welcome to Thursday. I hope you've had a great week so far, and I hope you're looking forward to a great weekend and a great Thanksgiving coming up next week. Perhaps you've had a chance to enjoy some of the really fantastic content that's been coming out of some of the virtual events going on. Last weekend, this week, the RV Dealers Association virtual event has been happening, and it's been awesome. And this week we had the Boating Industry Elevate Summit and also the announcement of this year's Top 100. Uh, Fantastic content and a great group of dealers in the Top 100 this year. Congratulations to all of them. So welcome to the next in our Recreational F&I Success series. And this one is Compliance Counts. Now, if you've been following along and attending the webinar series on compliance, you may find some of this to be a little repetitive. That's really okay. Compliance is way overlooked in our industry, but nevertheless, you're going to, I think, find yourself absolutely delighted and enthralled by some of the insight that we get from Rob Miller, our guest expert this week. So without further ado, we'll follow the same basic format that we always follow. A little reminder about what F&I success is, some words about compliance, our expert, Rob Miller, takeaway. If you have questions, feel free, type them in. We'll get to them as time permits. And as always, this is being recorded and will be made available. So compliance is not really hard. It's just important. And it's often overlooked. But keep in mind, it's not hard. Once you get going and you get things set up, compliance is really pretty easy, and it's definitely worthwhile. So let's remember what F&I success is. It's profiting more tomorrow than you did today. So continual improvement, moving those goalposts when you hit the goals. 8% F&I gross profit on an amount financed, 4% F&I net profit on unit sales, 65% penetration rates on protected product sales, 100% turnover. And I'll throw something else in here out of respect to today's topic. It also means not losing money because of issues surrounding compliance. You definitely don't want compliance to be a net deductor from your net profit. So where does compliance matter? For all your purposes, it matters for identity theft. Identity theft is far too common, and it's not hard to detect, but you have to be paying attention to it. It matters to avoid selling to terrorists or prohibited foreign actors. And it matters to prevent money laundering. Now, I know you're thinking, this would never be any of our customers. This is just not something that's really relevant. And that's absolutely true until it is. And then you have a problem, and then it may be too late. So compliance starts at the beginning. And if it does, then you won't have a problem. And I've said it before, I'll probably say it again through the course of today. You know, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades and in compliance. If you're doing the right things, if you're taking the right steps, and something unfortunate happens, the federal authorities will consider that you actually were making a best effort at compliance. So why does it matter? Well, it matters because you do want to protect your customers. You want to protect them from identity theft. You want to protect them from being involved. You want to protect your store. You want to protect yourself. And you want to protect your bottom line. So a red flags violation, and this is a case of identity theft occurring, can be up to $3,500 per violation in civil fines and $2,500 per violation to the FTC. One credit application left out where someone else walked away with personal information could cost you $6,000. Imagine if a stack of them got away. Disposal. You have to make sure that personal information is protected when you're throwing it out. Now, the place you think about that, and many of you are doing something about it, is in disposing of credit applications, anything that can be shredded. Now, think about this. Are you getting rid of a laptop or a desktop where you actually have stored personal information on the hard drive? It is your responsibility not just to delete the information, because deleting is not sufficient. There are tools to actually scrub the hard drives on those devices, effectively shredding the electronic footprint. Deleting typically simply means that the internal links to information are removed so that it's harder to find. But anyone with ill intent has the tools to go in and still find information. Failure to dispose of information properly could mean up to $2,500 per incident. Imagine if a bag of credit applications not properly shredded was thrown away and discovered. You could be out $60,000, $70,000 for that. OFAC. This has to do with identifying foreign actors who are prohibited to do business of any form in the United States. Sales to these prohibited entities or individuals, it's easy to detect these folks, but if you don't do it, there can be penalties up to $1 million, possibly even jail time, and civil penalties up to $55,000 per violation. When in doubt, do an OFAC check, please. Safeguard, again, this means treating personal information properly. Make sure it's protected, make sure it's locked up. You don't have a deal jacket with a credit application that you leave lying on your desk while you go talk to another customer or while you go to lunch. Protect that information while it's in your possession. And then there's the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act is related to money laundering and identifying money laundering. Now, the Patriot Act by itself doesn't carry any specific penalties. However, money laundering won't occur in general without identity theft and or a prohibited entity being involved in the transaction. So there will be multiple penalties. They just are not specified by the Patriot Act itself. And one more thing, especially today, in the day of COVID and trying to do virtual digital retailing, trying to do remote deliveries. Remote deliveries are fine if you sign papers at the remote delivery location. So not at your permanent location or not at an authorized temporary location. And an authorized temporary location would be a boat show or an RV show, a tent sale of some kind. But if you are at someone's property and you are signing the contracts there, you're required to provide them with a 3-day right of rescission notice. That's a pretty safe thing. Nobody's going to bring back their boat, their RV in 3 days, absent some mechanical failure, and that's a whole different issue for you. But the law says that if you do a remote delivery with remote paperwork, you have to provide that 3-day right of rescission, or that customer has a lifetime right of rescission. So do that correctly. What do you do about it? Well, the important thing is that you appoint, train, and empower a compliance officer. If you've got multiple locations, you need a compliance officer for each location. You have to have your compliance rules and regulations and actions and plans documented, and they have to be signed off by the compliance officer and by anyone else that's impacted by them. You have to train your employees, tell them what to look out for, tell them how to do things properly, train them, document that training, and have them sign that they've been trained. Protect the private and personally identifiable information of your customers. And finally, always, always, always check for prohibited actors and take the time to document it. Just take a screen snap of the red flags page when it comes up. Stick it away, you're good, you're safe. If you do it right, it's easy. If you do it wrong and it ends badly, you have a problem. So now we're going to listen to what Rob Miller, co-owner of the Cyclone Agency and a noted trainer for compliance and other F&I areas. Come on, Rob, where are you? There we go.
Well, I'm really excited today. We've got a real special guest. We've got Rob Miller. Rob Miller is the co-founder, co-owner of Cyclone Agency, which handles F&I ancillary products, financial ancillary products, and training for automotive, power sport, marine, RV dealers. And they've been doing this for a long time. And Rob and his partner have been in the industry for even a lot longer than that. I won't keep doing that part of the introduction because it'll make him seem old. Yeah. But Rob's got the experience that counts. So, Rob, I really appreciate you taking a few minutes to spend and give us some of your expertise on compliance today.
Happy to be with you today.
Well, great. I really appreciate it. So let's just start with this. It feels to me, and I see this often, is that the whole issue of compliance right now is one that if you ask a dealer about it, they'll say, oh, yeah, that's important. But the second they've got those words out of their mouth, there's kind of an eye roll. And it's like, I want to do anything but talk about compliance. So I guess my question for you is, why do you think that behavior exists? And I know you do compliance training and you work with your dealers on compliance. How do you encourage the importance of compliance and get that behavior changed a little bit so that they're really kind of focusing on compliance?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most burning and difficult question that dealers face. Is most dealers that I know, they got in the business really for one reason, and that's to sell their product, to treat their customer right, to get them to come back, to earn a nice living for themselves and their families. So I think that's the first thing that a dealer thinks about. And they also think with this compliance thing that if I treat people right and I do things the right way, what I believe is the correct way and what customers want, that I'll never have a problem. And even if I have a problem, I'll step into it and I'll make it right with the customer. Well, that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is in this world exists things like a class action attorney. And class action attorneys might find someone doing something incorrectly, violating compliance laws, and suddenly believe that everyone is doing it. And so that if you get involved in a class action lawsuit, not only will it cost you a bunch of your time, but it could cost you a bunch of your money, just proving that you didn't even do anything wrong. Can you imagine where that would go if they found out that you were indeed doing something incorrectly? So I think that's part of it, that the fear is really there because we think to ourselves, hey, I do things the right way. I'm a small dealer. Nobody really is targeting me. And I to some degree would agree with that. That if you do things the right way, you probably are going to be okay. But it's worried about that class action attorney number one. And then I think it's very easy then for a dealer when the information is really pretty convoluted out there. When we first started researching compliance, we found out that there were 29 governmental agencies that control the motor vehicle industry. And oftentimes federal law contradicts state law, and to the point where you almost feel like you have to be an attorney to figure it all out. So I think what happens is it gets kind of pushed aside. And pushed aside to the fact that we want to do things right and we believe we're doing things right, but we're probably not fully compliant in a lot of areas that we need to be. So I hope that kind of answers your question with that. It's not an out of sight, out of mind. It's just I'd rather push it aside and just try to make sure that I do things the right way for my people. And that, of course, is step one.
Well, but do you have any magic words that it can give to dealers to get them to take the steps to actually be compliant?
Yeah, a couple things. One of them would be that just what I said about not worrying about what other dealers or what you do, but what other dealers are doing. And then number two, it's the avoidance of litigation in some cases where that can drag on for several weeks, several months sometimes. It's just a lot easier to be compliant than it is to not be compliant in the end. And I think that's where dealers have to realize that it's a simpler thing to get compliant. There's literally a checklist that you can go down through. And for the most part, when we do compliance audits, we'll find that dealers are about 60 to 75% compliant. And that comes back, Merrill, to the fact that you can't be just a little bit compliant. You need to be all the way compliant. And I think once dealers kind of realize that it's easier than they think it is to be compliant. And the best part of it is it doesn't cost anything to do that. It could cost you a ton, though, not to be compliant. So I think that would be my message.
That's good. That's good. I'm going to use that too. That's
Feel free.
So, in your experience, are you seeing compliance is actually a very broad subject. I mean, there's lots of different areas. Do you see 2 or 3 sort of primary areas for compliance breakdowns with the folks that you work with and talk to? And if you do, what are they, and how do you help your dealers get compliant?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the Privacy Act, we do a very, very good job as an industry of making sure that people realize that the transaction you're completing with me is private. They give people that initial privacy notice. The problem is, here's one of those areas where you can't be just kind of compliant. We ask immediately, the follow-up question is, are you giving the required annual notices? And then it's deer in the headlights. What would it mean annual notice? Well, it is a requirement that as long as you have a business relationship with the consumer, which means that they're making payments on their loan for 60 months, they are frequenting your service department, your salespeople are calling them back, meaning that you have a relationship with that customer, you have to continue to send them annually these compliance or these privacy notices. And we all get them. I mean, if you have a credit card, an insurance policy, a loan, a mortgage, you're getting them, and they're basically junk mail. But that's a requirement. It used to be very expensive to send those out via regular mail, and a lot of folks have gone to the electronic method where we just email it to the customer. So that would be one area. The second one that goes along with that is safeguard rules. We sometimes don't do a very good job of buttoning down private information in our own showrooms. I can do a compliance audit with safeguard rules, walk through a showroom and find credit apps laying right side up with customer signature and names on several tables. I can find that we're not keeping files secure like we need to. I can find that we're not taking computer screens back to the password level. We're just leaving them up during the day. So just having someone designated as that compliance officer that just walks through the showroom once in a while and checks those things out and educates salespeople and managers about what they can and can't do, that goes a long way to being compliant. So I see those two a lot, and I also see the OFAC thing that is out there. And I hope everyone knows what OFAC is and what it really means. OFAC is the Office of Foreign Asset Controls, part of the U.S. Treasury. They control the flow of money in and out of this country. That list got started in the 80s under the Reagan administration when he declared war on the Colombian drug cartel. And so a lot of the names that you see on that list are Hispanic. And it expanded after 2001 when we had 9/11. President Bush at the time added terrorists and money launderers to that list. The last time I looked at it, Muriel, that list was 415,000 names, individuals and businesses and organizations known to support terrorism and money laundering. Where our compliance comes in is that we are required to collect photo ID from the customer and then take that ID and run it against the OFAC list on every retail transaction, whether it's a cash buyer, a finance buyer, or a lease. And for the most part, our retail customers that are financing or leasing are kind of checked out by our lender, but we still need to be able to prove that we did it. The ones that we miss are those cash customers. And they're the ones that are most likely to be involved in money laundering or something like that. And so we put together a checklist of things that we look for each time. The government didn't do us a favor with OFAC and the $10,000 cash reporting rule. Back in 2017, they added language that said suspicious transactions of any nature need to be reported of any dollar amount. And so it may help to designate what actually cash is for your listeners. Cash is coin and currency. It's cashier's checks written for under $10,000. Cashier's checks over $10,000 are automatically reported. It does not include personal checks, but it does include those cashier's checks that are under 10 grand, because money can be received in combination, can it? I could take $3,000 in cash and a $7,500 cashier's check. That's $10,000 in cash in a single transaction. So OFAC is another one that we see not being followed very well. And honestly, it's the one that carries the heaviest criminal and civil penalties. And we have to keep the information for a period of 7 years after we check OFAC. And it's a simple process. It's just check and make sure this individual's not on the list. One of the things that happens to a lot of our dealers is they get partial hits. Partial hits would mean that I called in a name, and let's just say it's a common name like Charles Taylor. Charles Taylor will get a hit on OFAC. Charles Taylor was the former president of Liberia. He's a smuggler and a human trafficker, and so a bad guy, and he's on the list. You may get a Charles Taylor in your dealership. It's very simple to take that. There's an 800 number. And there's also a website that you can get cleared on OFAC. So being compliant on OFAC is really simple. It's just committing to it and doing it with every single customer.
Yeah, I agree. I think the OFAC thing is really important. We share the OFAC website, which is so simple. But just put the name in, and then you put more of the address in. And typically, even when you get those hits, once you just add a little more information, all of a sudden the hit starts to disappear.
Yeah.
And then, take a screenshot of that, stick it in your deal jacket, and you're good. I do think you're absolutely right, and you already touched on this, but there's definitely confusion between the FinCEN 8300 $10,000 cash rule and what that means for OFAC. I can't tell you the number of conversations I've had where somebody said, well, it's less than $10,000, so I don't need to worry about OFAC. I said, no, that's just not right.
Yep. Yeah, totally separate rulings, but they kind of they definitely work in conjunction with one another. OFAC is just about proving someone isn't already on a list. That list is the specially designated nationals list. They call it the SDN list, blocked persons list. We can't transact business with them. Right. And so if we did, and we hadn't checked OFAC, we would have potentially some explaining to do. That might be more than just explaining. So that's one part of it. The FinCEN part, the 8300 form, goes hand in hand with that, because that's who they're trying to catch, someone that would be trying to attempt to launder money or commit a terrorist act or something like that. That particular ruling, because they now track transactions that are suspicious in nature, I always like to give definitions. I'll give you two. Someone comes into my dealership and says, show me the nicest boat you have and trailer for $99.95 delivered in cash. I'm hoisting my suspicious flag at that point. The person knows about the $10,000 cash reporting rule. And again, remember with that, there's no harm in reporting someone. If their money came and it was derived from legal means, they'll never hear from anyone. If it was derived from illegal means, they're probably going to have a knock on their door. If someone came into my dealership with wadded up $5, $10, and $20 bills in a plastic baggie, hoist the flag again. I'm suspicious about how that money was derived. So you never hurt yourself by being compliant with that. It's just a matter of, again, being committed to turning that in. So yeah, they go hand in hand. And I would say if we're looking at all of the different components of compliance, the final piece would be that I see a lot of is the red flag. And again, it's part of just making sure that the individual is who you're talking to. And my own personal favorite with that is to use Social Security number prefixes. And as we're conversing with the consumer and we're either taking a credit application or we're into that mode, if I say, you're a 059 prefix, and I say, gosh, Merrill, I noticed you grew up in New Hampshire. If you say, wow, Rob, how'd you know I grew up in New Hampshire? Well, your Social Security number told me. What would be the odds that that wouldn't be that individual? It would be astronomical. But if the person looks at you and says, what are you talking about? I'm not from New Hampshire. We may have a case of identity theft. And as we all know, identity theft is America's largest crime at this point. It's run rampant. And part of our responsibility as motor vehicle dealers is to make sure that we know who we're selling our product to. So that's one that we definitely need to be diligent with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's another area that's become more of an unknown but interesting compliance issue, and that is, especially now with the pandemic, this idea of remote deliveries. And maybe you could talk a little bit about what I think a lot of dealers really don't understand, which is what challenges are that remote delivery presents.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an area where there's just confusion. And I think the confusion is caused by the fact that there's so many online retailers out there right now that we're competing against. And what ends up happening is we will deliver a vehicle and do the paperwork off premise in the consumer's place of business or their home or their wherever they're at. And that then draws up something known as the right of rescission. And it's 3 business days. The customer has the right to bring the vehicle back for any reason. It goes back to old antiquated laws. They used to call it the vacuum cleaner salesman law, where if someone came to your house and solicited you, you had the right to back out of that transaction up to 3 business days. It's okay that we're doing it as long as we give notice to the consumer that they have 3 days to bring the product back. If we fail to do that, then we've actually given them the right of rescission for as long as they own the product. And so having a written notice that we give them is a very important factor in that. But you bring up something else that's interesting as well. most of our dealers that we do business with, marine dealers included, are licensed by the state and where they're at to do business primarily in their building, their place of business. They can't transact business anywhere else according to most state laws. And so we run into that with it as well, that we may be in violation of our dealer license. The problem is, again, it's the way consumers want to do transactions. And so we're almost victim to that if we won't do it, a customer will go somewhere and find someone who will. So the best way to help us with that is to do all of our transactions in a closed loop. The closed loop would be via UPS or FedEx, where that signature has to be made to collect the package. We know that it went to that person, they signed it and sent it back. To do the paperwork online, electronically, if that's possible, or to have them sign the paperwork in your licensed premise of business and then deliver them the car, that's perfectly fine. Or deliver them the boat, that's perfectly fine. It's just when we sign the paperwork off premise that we evoke that right of rescission. So great question, Merle.
So that's good. I don't think that's something that dealers, certainly not dealers I work with, are largely aware of.
Right.
And honestly, I think you've helped educate me on this in the course of this. So that's now something I will pay a lot more attention to.
Yeah. It goes back, listen, it goes back to the same thing that we always talk about. 99% of the world, at least I still believe this, are good people. And so even if there's a problem with the consumer, if we do our best as a dealer to resolve that problem so that the customer feels like you've worked with them, normally that goes away. But we still have that 1% out there that's looking for you to do something wrong. And many folks are now aware of the right of rescission. And it's just a simple signature on a form that says, hey, I know I have 3 days to bring it back. And we're dealing with all of these different online retailers that don't seem to really think the rules apply to them. So I understand why a dealer feels kind of crippled with that one, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, so, and I think you've touched on what I'm about to ask to some extent, but this is just kind of an open-ended question. If you were able to offer your best advice to dealers as to how and why to implement compliance best practices, what would it be and why?
Yeah, well, in a nutshell, it doesn't cost a lot of money and time to be compliant, but it could cost you a ton not to be. And I think that's the best reason. An ounce of prevention is, worth a pound of cure every single time. And we want to make sure that our dealers are doing what they do best, which is sell and deliver boats to the public. And when they do that, then they're happy and everybody's happy. There's no reason to put yourself in a position where something could go wrong legally when we all know what it is that we need to do. And getting compliant is not difficult at all. And what I would strongly suggest to the viewers of this particular webinar is that do designate a compliance officer in their dealership. And I have to kind of chuckle about this one because this is a tag you're it situation. And normally we see a finance and insurance person or a person who's doing that paperwork or a office manager, someone who's processing paperwork. They're generally the best suited to do that. And I think if we designate a single person that's in charge of it, and then we grant them or empower them with doing things the right way and constantly educating the rest of our staff, that we can always demonstrate intent, Merle. And intent goes a long way in the law, right? We intended to do things the right way. There was no intent here to defraud or to not follow the law. And whenever we can prove that in our dealership, then that goes a mile. So that's our best practice. Yeah,
no, actually, it's interesting. One of the things that I do talk about is that the phrase close only counts in horseshoes, hand grenades, and compliance. If you are making a best effort and you are trying to do the right things and you demonstrate that, then mistakes may still happen, but it's not going to be as hard on you as if you're not trying. So
I 100% agree, and we see that. I've been around long enough to see some dealers be audited on several of the things we're talking about, and intent was always a word that was used. Is that we had intent to do it the right way, and it does go a long ways, especially with regulators.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Rob, I, again, really appreciate this. I think you've shared some incredibly valuable information, and I truly appreciate your time.
I appreciate you asking me to come on and talk to your folks. It's always fun to do that. I hope sometime we can do it again, Merrill, when the subject isn't quite so, how do I say that, boring? I don't know.
Oh, now. Compliance.
No, it's not a boring subject. It's something that we need to do. But I will say this, for your folks especially, there's a lot of resources out there. I mean, you're certainly one of the better ones for them to get this information. And I think just getting that checklist out to people and letting them just go down through it and see where you're at right now. That's the best way to start. Just see where you're at right now, and you'll find out that you probably don't have far to go. And I think that's what most dealers discover when we start talking to them about it. They go, well, we do all those things now. Okay, well, we just got a couple of quick things to button up, and we're smooth sailing at that point.
Yep. That's awesome. Awesome. Well, again, I appreciate your time and your wisdom. So thanks very much. And it's been great.
Thanks, Merrill.
Thank you.
So I think that was really a useful conversation. I hope you got something really, really important out of it. Compliance, it really does matter. It matters for your customers and it matters for you. It's not expensive to be compliant. It can be hugely expensive not to be. So just take the time to do it right. Appoint a compliance officer, document your policies, train your employees, protect your data. That's all it is. Do it right, and you'll be very, very happy. So one of the common questions, and we're to the question and answer session now, we'll wrap this up. One of the common questions that I get is some variation on, is this real? I just don't see the issues. And the reality is, most of the time you won't see the issues. And you're not doing compliance because you don't trust most of the people that come in, or you don't trust your employees, or because a lot of times things are going to happen. That's not the reason why you're doing compliance. You're doing compliance for that 0.1% of the time when something bad does happen, and you just don't want to be in that position. So we've got time for just a couple of other questions. So we take checks all the time, some big, some small. Do I need to do anything special? Not with checks. Checks are a safe form of transaction for you. It's up to the banking authority that allows the check to be issued to be doing all the checking on checks. Now, you still have to report transactions over $10,000, but checks are safe. So just to clarify, do I have to or need to report and do OFAC checks on cash of $10,000 or more? Well, yes, but all cash transactions are potentially subject to OFAC checks. Now, there's some kind of reasonableness test here. If somebody comes in and buys a $2 can of soda for cash, that's probably not OFAC worthy. But when they're coming in and paying cash, as Rob talked about, when they brought in a plastic bag full of bills, or they're going close to a limit, or it just becomes a transaction where you could see the possibility of some kind of money laundering going on, take the time, do the OFAC check. It's pretty simple. You just let the customer know you've got to give them a receipt. Could you see their driver's license? Do the OFAC check. It's pretty easy. So here's the last one that we'll get to today. If my F&I office is locked and unlockable, but the filing cabinets in it are not, am I okay? Well, I mean, the short answer is no, you're not. If you kept your finance office locked all the time and nobody was ever allowed in it that was not authorized to be seeing personally identifiable information, arguably you might be okay. But as a matter of certainty, just get locking filing cabinets. You'll be so much better off, and the investment will be worth it. And let your unlocked filing cabinets go to use for other things, for your service department, for your pro shop. But keep your personal information locked up in locked drawers in locked filing cabinets. So to wrap this up, compliance is not just a thing. There are real requirements and there are real consequences. It's not as hard as it sounds. It's not expensive. So just do it. So our next webinar will be back on Wednesday at December 2nd. It's 100% turnover. What, why, and how. We're looking forward to seeing you there. So again, the information is here. I'll be publishing all of this. You can send me an email and we'll get you started on that. If you're interested, there is another compliance webinar tomorrow about the disposal rules. That will be at 11:30. So you can also shoot me a note and I'll get you the invitation to that as well. So we'll see you on the 2nd. And the last thing, have a wonderful, happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks very much, everybody.